Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
Today's briefing is about a hard subject that lives in the gap between testimony, trauma, physics, and public confusion. Many people report severe physical sensations they believe are caused by directed energy or electromagnetic targeting. The goal of this presentation is not to ridicule those reports, and it is not to turn speculation into certainty. The goal is to do something rarer and more useful: separate what science actually supports, what remains plausible but unproven, and what clearly outruns current evidence. This matters because pain without proof creates a perfect storm of suffering. When the experience feels real, but the mechanism is unclear, people can be dismissed too quickly or misled too easily. So this presentation takes an evidence-first path. We will look at established biological interactions, real technical limits, and the difference between a documented effect and a deployable covert weapon. Before getting technical, we need to start with the lived experience. Across many reports, people describe a consistent cluster of body sensations: skull pressure, sudden ear pain, piercing tinnitus, burning or heating sensations on the skin, chest or abdominal distress, pins and needles tingling, dizziness, nausea, agitation, fatigue, and severe sleep disruption. Whether every explanation attached to these experiences is correct is a separate question. The suffering itself should not be brushed aside. That is the moral baseline. But an honest investigation has to go one step further. It has to map these symptom claims against the actual laws of biology and electromagnetics. Because not every felt sensation proves a specific technology, and not every theoretical technology can actually produce the sensations people report at the distances and conditions being claimed. In other words, compassion and skepticism are not enemies here. They have to work together. This subject stays controversial because public discussion blends together three very different things. First, there is verified science and declassified history. Real research into electromagnetic effects, programs like the Moscow signal investigations, and modern discussions around cognitive warfare. Second, there is patent literature and prototype culture, where an idea can be filed, diagrammed, even partially demonstrated, without proving it is practical, scalable, or secretly deployed. Third, there is internet folklore and extrapolation, in which civilian satellite systems are assumed to be weapons, and a known phenomenon like microwave hearing is stretched into full remote mind-reading mythology. That mix creates fog. A documented effect becomes a rumored system. A speculative capability becomes treated like a settled fact. This presentation cuts through that fog by applying one rule again and again: what can be shown, what can be plausibly inferred, and what should be rejected until stronger evidence appears. There are real mechanisms by which energy can affect the body. Millimeter wave systems, such as the active denial system at around 95 gigahertz, are designed to heat the outer layer of skin very rapidly. They do not penetrate deeply into the body, but they can cause intense pain on the surface. Another mechanism is the microwave auditory effect, sometimes called the Frey effect. In that case, rapid pulsed microwave energy can produce a tiny thermoelastic expansion in tissue, generating a pressure wave that is perceived as clicking or buzzing inside the head. There are also photoacoustic and directed acoustic methods, in which energy can produce a localized audible or painful effect within a confined region. So the important point is this: some directed energy interactions are absolutely real, but each one has a very specific mechanism, a very specific range, and a very specific set of constraints. Physics is not magic. It always sends a bill. This is where dramatic claims usually collide with reality. Energy disperses over distance. That is the inverse square law in action, and it is brutal. The farther the target, the more power you need to maintain a meaningful effect. Then the atmosphere steps in. Frequencies that carry high energy, especially in the millimeter wave range, are absorbed by water vapor, fog, rain, and air itself. Buildings make things worse. Drywall, wood, insulation, and concrete scatter and absorb high-frequency energy. Then there is hardware reality. A powerful microwave source is not a pocket-sized ghost. It needs power, cooling, directional control, and physical space. So while close-range effects are one thing, the idea of a reliable covert system that can selectively target deep internal organs through walls from a long distance, without clear collateral evidence, is not supported by public science. The laws of nature do not bend just because a claim is emotionally compelling. Modern infrastructure gets dragged into these discussions constantly, especially systems like Starlink, SDR platforms, and the phrase remote touch, so let's cut that cleanly. Civilian LEO broadband systems use phased arrays and electronically steered beams, but they are built for communications, not weaponized biological targeting. Their power densities, architecture, and operational purpose do not match the claims often made online. Hacking a terminal or modifying firmware does not magically rewrite the laws of output power, beam physics, or atmospheric loss. The phrase remote touch also needs discipline. There is literature about injecting signals into consumer touchscreens to simulate taps. That is electronic interference with devices. There is no validated proof of remotely stimulating the human nervous system, as if a person were a smartphone. We live in an era where technical language gets borrowed and repainted as mythology. This slide is here to put the bones back in the body. When the reported targeting centers on the head, ears, and sensory system, some interactions are at least grounded in documented mechanisms. Microsecond RF pulses can produce thermoelastic pressure waves that may be perceived as clicks or buzzes. High-power directed acoustics can absolutely cause ear pain, dizziness, and disorientation. It is also plausible that, in a close-range, highly controlled setting, certain energetic exposures could disturb the vestibular system and cause vertigo or nausea. But that is very different from saying that complex thoughts can be read from across a city, or that individual neurons can be precisely manipulated through ambient civilian infrastructure. The jump from some sensory effects are possible to remote cognitive domination is operationally routine, is not a small leap. It is a canyon. This is where the burden of proof has to stay heavy. Otherwise, real science gets used as a stage prop for claims it does not actually support. The same discipline applies to claims involving the torso, gut, chest, skin, and whole body agitation. Surface heating and pain are well documented under certain directed energy conditions. That part is real. But deep organ targeting is another matter entirely. Microwaves and similar energy do not politely bypass the skin, fat, and muscle just to strike a chosen internal organ like a sniper with manners. Energy is absorbed and attenuated along the way. So claims of selective through-wall targeting of the intestines, heart, or genitals using covert civilian-scale microwave systems are not well supported by the public physics literature. On the other hand, chronic stress, sleep disruption, repeated sensory harassment, or certain environmental exposures could absolutely produce systemic exhaustion and biological hypervigilance. The body can be pushed into chaos without science fiction. That distinction matters, because otherwise every symptom gets assigned to the most dramatic story rather than the most defensible mechanism. One of the biggest traps in this field is treating patents like confessions. A patent does not prove a device works. It proves that someone filed a novel idea and convinced a patent office it was distinct enough to register. That is not the same thing as scientific validation, engineering feasibility, or covert deployment. Declassified programs are similar. They can show that governments explored real effects under controlled conditions, and that is important. But controlled laboratory demonstrations often sit right near safety limits, require specialized hardware, and do not automatically scale into portable, invisible systems that can be used covertly against private citizens. There is a massive deployment gap between a bench experiment and a fieldable weapon. So the right question is never just, was this concept studied? The right question is, at what range, at what power, through what medium, with what hardware, under what constraints, and with what detectable side effects? That is where fantasy usually starts sweating. Havana syndrome is a crucial case study because it shows both why this topic cannot be dismissed casually and why proof is so hard to secure. Diplomatic and intelligence personnel reported sudden directional pressure, piercing sounds, vertigo, headaches, and later cognitive symptoms. The 2020 National Academy's report concluded that directed, pulsed radiofrequency energy was the most plausible mechanism for at least some of the acute sensory phenomena described. That is nothing. It means serious institutions treated energetic mechanisms as worthy of investigation. But even with elite resources, access to global intelligence, and national security urgency, investigators still struggle to identify the exact source, device, or actors with certainty. That should sober everyone up. It shows that unusual energetic effects may be possible in some cases, while also proving how extraordinarily difficult attribution becomes. If governments struggle to pin it down, civilian claims face an even steeper mountain. This slide is the spine of the presentation. On the verified side, we have documented physics, the microwave auditory effect, superficial skin heating from millimeter waves, laser-induced or acoustic shock phenomena under controlled conditions, and other tightly defined interactions. In the plausible category, we can place certain close-range harassment scenarios, limited vestibular disruption, or localized interference with nearby personal electronics, provided the engineering context makes sense. But then we reach the unsupported zone, satellite-based biological targeting, as casually described online, covert beam weaponization from extreme standoff distances, remote extraction or injection of complex thoughts, and long-range selective manipulation of deep organs. That is where claims outrun evidence. So the responsible position is neither total denial nor total belief. It is categorization. What is real? What is possible but not demonstrated here? What belongs in the bucket labeled "Show me better evidence"? That bucket, by the way, should be larger than people think. When people describe hearing clicks, buzzing, knocking, or even speech-like impressions, the microwave auditory effect usually enters the conversation. The proposed mechanism is thermoelastic expansion. A rapid pulse creates a tiny transient heat rise, which expansion launches a pressure wave, and the body interprets it as sound inside the head. That much is grounded in documented research. But the leap from simple internally perceived sounds to sustained interactive conversational V2K is enormous. In older laboratory settings, some basic word transmission experiments were reported, but they involved controlled environments and demanding parameters. To produce clear, adaptive, ongoing speech remotely would require extraordinary precision in pulse control, energy management, and targeting. Ambient RF noise and ordinary communications infrastructure do not casually become a telepathic radio station. So this slide draws a hard line. Yes, there is a documented auditory phenomenon. No, that does not prove every modern V2K narrative as commonly described. If this issue is ever going to move beyond argument and into proof, the evidence standard has to get sharper. First, synchronized symptom logs with precise timestamps, locations, and environmental context. Second, RF spectrum analysis, capable of capturing pulsed anomalies that line up exactly with symptom onset. Third, shielding tests, in which grounded conductive barriers are used in a disciplined, documented manner to determine whether effects change under controlled conditions. Fourth, corroboration, including witnesses, nearby electronics behaving abnormally, or repeatable patterns across multiple people. Fifth, medical workups, especially audiological and vestibular testing, to identify objective physiological changes instead of relying only on narrative recall. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary rigor. Fear, rumors, patents, and screenshots from the internet are not enough. The truth is not insulted by evidence, it is revealed by it. And if the claim is real, then disciplined documentation is the bridge between private suffering and public credibility. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a place more honest than denial, and more useful than myth-making. Some physical effects from directed electromagnetic and acoustic energy are real. Some reported harassment patterns remain plausible in narrow contexts, but unproven in the broader civilian sense. And many of the largest narratives, especially satellite targeting and routine remote mind control, go beyond what public physics and evidence support. The ethical response is not reflex ridicule. It is also not reckless amplification. It is sober investigation, technical honesty, medical seriousness, and disciplined evidence collection. People who suffer deserve better than mockery, but they also deserve better than false certainty dressed up as research. Truth is narrow. It does not care who is offended. It only cares what holds up under pressure. And on a subject this serious, pressure is exactly what we owe it.